It begins with a quiet Saturday morning in Toledo, Ohio, the kind of morning that feels ordinary, almost forgettable. But what unfolded behind the doors of a modest home on Monroe Street would soon become a story of deception, captivity, and a betrayal so disturbing that it shook the local community to its core. This is not the kind of case you can easily walk away from. It lingers in your mind, making you question how well we ever really know the people we love the most. Today, we're going to take you inside the chilling ordeal of Margaret Warren, a mother whose disappearance seemed at first like one more sad missing person report, but turned out to be something far darker than anyone could have imagined. Stay with me until the end, because the twists in this case are shocking, and the truth that investigators uncovered will leave you speechless. On July 10th, 2021, 32-year-old Alicia Warren called the Toledo Police Department to report her mother missing. She told dispatchers that 58-year-old Margaret Warren had left their home on Monroe Street that morning to buy groceries but never came back. Alicia explained that she had searched around the neighborhood herself before finally deciding to involve the police. Officers were sent to the Warren residence, a simple two-story rental property, where they met Alicia at the front door. Right away, there were details that stood out. On the porch near the entrance, officers noticed a neat stack of printed flyers, each bearing Margaret's photograph. Alicia explained that she had made them on her computer as soon as she realized her mother hadn't returned. To the officers, this seemed unusually fast, as if Alicia had been prepared before anyone would normally consider a loved one missing. Still, they documented her statement. Alicia explained that her mother didn't drive, that she had left without her purse, and that she was in fragile health. According to her, Margaret relied on daily medication and rarely ventured far from the house. She insisted her mother couldn't have gone more than a few blocks on foot. At first, the case was treated like a typical missing person report. Margaret Warren was well known around the neighborhood. She attended church services at St. Paul's Lutheran Church and often joined senior activities at the community cantor. Her neighbors described her as reliable, kind, and never one to simply vanish. Detectives quickly checked with people who had last seen her. The church choir remembered her attending practice on July 7th, just 3 days earlier. No one reported seeing any unusual behavior or conflict. That detail reassured police at first, but also deepened the mystery. How could a woman known for consistency and routine suddenly disappear without a trace? The investigation's first step was canvassing the Monroe Street area. Detectives pulled security footage from nearby businesses, including a gas station only 2 blocks away. Strangely, Margaret never appeared on any video from July 10th or the days following. Neighbors were interviewed, but none had seen her leave that morning. Several even emphasized that they hadn't seen Margaret outside at all during that week. For investigators, this was troubling. A missing person report relies heavily on the idea that someone was last seen leaving, but in this case, no one outside Alicia could confirm that. Still, detectives did everything by the book. Margaret was entered into the statewide missing persons database, and a silver alert was issued because she was considered vulnerable due to her age and health. Flyers were distributed, alerts sent out, and the community encouraged to look out for any trace of her. Over the following weeks, Alicia appeared determined and deeply involved in the search. She called detectives regularly, asking about progress and reminding them of her mother's health risks. She was photographed at grocery stores, community centers, and even outside churches, taping flyers to bulletin boards and posing beside posters with her mother's face. To the public, it looked like the image of a devoted daughter refusing to give up hope. But behind the scenes, the investigation wasn't producing results. Financial records revealed that Margaret's last prescription refill had been on June 22nd, nearly 3 weeks before her disappearance. She hadn't attended any medical appointments or made routine purchases. Her Social Security payments were still coming in, but there were no transactions from her accounts after July 10th. For a woman known to shop weekly, this silence in her financial life was alarming. Detectives questioned Alicia about Margaret's cell phone, hoping to track it. Alicia said her mother disliked using the phone and that it had disappeared the same day she did. That left investigators without a digital trail. By early September, nearly 2 months later, there were still no credible sightings of Margaret Warren. Volunteers searched abandoned lots, nearby parks, and wooded areas, but they found nothing. At this point, detectives began noticing something else. Alicia's story never changed. Each time she was asked about the timeline, she repeated her account almost word for word, as if rehearsed. Detectives noted that her emotional behavior at public events, crying for the cameras, pleading for help, seemed strangely at odds with her flat, controlled demeanor during private questioning. By October, the case was officially considered cold. But one detail haunted investigators. No one had ever actually seen Margaret leave her house on July 10th. No surveillance footage. No neighbor sighting. Nothing. This gap in the evidence was too glaring to ignore. Senior investigators recommended a deeper look at the Warren residence. Police had done a quick walkthrough in July, but it was limited to the visible areas of the home. Alicia had been polite and cooperative, showing them bedrooms and the kitchen. Nothing unusual was documented. But with months gone by and no leads elsewhere, detectives wondered if something critical had been missed. On October 12, 2021, the Toledo Police Department obtained a judicial search warrant for the entire property, including storage spaces and the basement. When Alicia was informed, she bristled, telling investigators they had already torn the place apart. But this time would be different. With the warrant signed by a Lucas County judge, detectives arrived to carry out a systematic search. The upstairs floors told the same story. Margaret's clothes were still in her closet, her ID in her purse, and her medications untouched in the bathroom cabinet. It was as if she had never left. Then, the search shifted to the basement. At first, it seemed ordinary. Cardboard boxes stacked along the walls. A washer and dryer. Shelves of cleaning supplies. But then, an officer noticed something unusual. A large shelving unit wasn't pushed flush against the wall. It sat at an angle, slightly out of place. When detectives ordered it moved, they discovered a small wooden door, secured with a steel padlock that looked newer than the rest of the basement fixtures. The frame had fresh reinforcement marks, as if someone had made sure it couldn't be forced open. When asked for the key, Alicia claimed she didn't have one. Officers weren't convinced. A quick search of her belongings revealed a key ring that did, in fact, fit the lock. At 3:45 p.m., the padlock was removed. What they found behind that door would haunt them. The hidden space was roughly 10 by 8 feet. Inside, a thin stained mattress lay on the floor beside a bucket used as a toilet. Empty food cans and bread wrappers littered the ground. A bare light bulb hung from the ceiling, casting a dim, oppressive glow. The smell of mildew and human waste was overwhelming. And in the corner of the room sat Margaret Warren. She was alive, but barely. She was visibly emaciated, her clothes the same ones last seen at choir practice 3 months earlier. Her hair was matted, her skin pale from lack of sunlight. Red marks on her wrists suggested she had been restrained. When paramedics rushed in, she tried to speak, her voice hoarse from disuse. In broken words, she told them her daughter had locked her in a room months earlier. Margaret was rushed to Promedica Toledo Hospital. Officers upstairs immediately placed Alicia under arrest. During questioning, Alicia claimed she had panicked and filed the missing person report as a way of covering for herself. She offered vague excuses about trying to protect her mother, but detectives confronted her with evidence from a search. Even worse, financial investigators revealed that while Margaret had been trapped in the basement, more than $40,000 in benefits had been withdrawn from her accounts. Surveillance cameras showed Alicia herself making the withdrawals, and handwriting experts confirmed the signatures were forgeries. When detectives interviewed Margaret at the hospital days later, she described how Alicia had convinced her to go downstairs in early July, claiming renovations required her to stay there temporarily. Once she was inside, Alicia padlocked the door. Margaret said she was fed irregularly, denied her medication, and told repeatedly that no one would believe her if she tried to escape. Her daughter threatened she would be placed in an institution if she told anyone what was happening. Margaret endured more than 3 months in that room, slowly growing weaker by the day. Co-workers of Alicia later testified that she often joked about not worrying over bills because mom's got it covered. None of them had ever been allowed to visit her home. The evidence painted a clear picture of control, exploitation, and betrayal. When the trial began in May 2022, the prosecution laid out the timeline. They showed the jury the photographs of the basement cell, the forged bank records, and surveillance footage. The most powerful moment came when Margaret herself took the stand. She told the jury about her confinement, her declining health, and the constant fear that she would die in that basement, forgotten by everyone except the daughter who locked her away. The defense tried to argue diminished capacity, claiming Alicia acted under stress and poor judgment. But the jury was unconvinced. After less than 6 hours of deliberation, they returned with guilty verdicts on all counts: kidnapping, elder abuse, financial exploitation, fraud, and obstruction of justice. On June 20th, 2022, Judge William Kramer sentenced Alicia Warren to 35 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 28. He called her actions a grotesque abuse of the trust between parent and child. Margaret Warren survived her ordeal, but the scars, both physical and emotional, would remain. She became a living reminder of resilience in the face of unimaginable betrayal. And for the rest of us, this case raises questions that are harder to answer. How could a daughter go to such lengths to control and exploit her own mother? How many others suffer in silence, hidden behind the walls of seemingly ordinary homes? What began as a missing person report in Toledo turned into one of the most haunting discoveries the community had ever seen. A reminder that sometimes the greatest danger doesn't come from strangers in the dark, but from the people closest to us. So as we close this case, think about the strength it took for Margaret to survive those long, hidden months. And think about the vigilance required in our own communities to notice when something feels wrong, to ask questions, and to speak up. Because sometimes speaking up is the only thing that can bring the truth to light.